Thank you very much, Jen, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to spend a few minutes to provide you with an overview of what we have done and are continuing to do and what we are dedicated to achieving. We are dedicated to achieving and, quite frankly, are working around the clock to replace the cruelty of the past administration with an orderly, humane, and safe immigration process. It is hard and it will take time, but rest assured we are going to get it done. Let me explain to you why it is hard and why it is going to take time. I think it is important to understand what we have inherited because it defines the situation as it currently stands. Entire systems are not rebuilt in a day or in a few weeks. To put it succinctly, the prior administration dismantled our nation's immigration system in its entirety. When I started 27 days ago, I learned that we did not have the facilities available or equipped to administer the humanitarian laws that our Congress passed years ago. We did not have the personnel, policies, procedures, or training to administer those laws. Quite frankly, the entire system was gutted. In addition, they tore down the Central American Minors Program that allowed children to access laws of protection without having to take the perilous journey north. They cut off funding to the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. No planning had been done to protect the frontline personnel of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and other frontline personnel that address the needs of individuals coming to our border. Contracts had been entered that were unlawful or against the interests of the United States Department of Justice, and that's just the tip of it. And I must tell you that it pains me profoundly to say this today on March 1st, the 18th anniversary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It takes time to rebuild an entire system and to process individuals at the border in a safe and just way. That is especially true when we're in the midst of the pandemic and are obligated, of course, to adhere to the restrictions and procedures that have been promulgated by the CDC to ensure public safety, including the safety of the individuals who arrive at our border. It takes time to build out of the depths of cruelty that the administration before us established. What we are seeing now at the border is the immediate result of the dismantlement of the system and the time that it takes to rebuild it virtually from scratch. We have, though, already begun to design and, in fact, have begun to implement a new, innovative way to address the needs of the population that was forced to remain in Mexico during the prior administration. That rebuilding, that innovative solution is but one part of a multi-part strategy to execute on the President's vision. For example, we've also begun to rebuild the process for young people to be able to access avenues of protection without having to take the perilous journey. We have begun to develop and rebuild the program to reunify individuals with their families here in the United States, as was once the case. The President set forth his bold vision in his executive orders at the outset of his administration, and we are driven to implement them successfully. Let me, if I can, take a couple minutes to explain that innovative system to which I referred with respect to how we are addressing the individuals who were forced into the Remain in Mexico program under the prior administration. Working very closely with the Mexican government and international organizations in Mexico, we have developed a virtual platform that enables individuals with active cases in the Remain in Mexico program to actually register for relief using their phones. The international organizations then work with those individuals to test them, process their cases, and transport them safely and according to a defined schedule to the port of entry, where we are awaiting them and can process them through the port of entry successfully. We started with one port and 25 individuals a day. We are now at 3 ports, and we have enhanced our processes at one of those 3 ports to reach 100 individuals a day in processing to address the acute need in the camp at Matamoros, which we have all heard so much about. This is all, by the way, at a time when we are also addressing the needs of our frontline personnel. Soon after I took office on February 2nd, we launched Operation VOW, Vaccinate Our Workforce, where we have really surged resources and capabilities according to the paradigm that has been established by the COVID-19 task force to address the needs of frontline personnel throughout the federal government. In February alone, we started at 2% of that frontline personnel workforce vaccinated. At the end of February, we were able to reach 20% of the frontline personnel. I have to take this opportunity at the same time to reiterate a message that we have communicated repeatedly throughout, which is a message to those individuals who are thinking of coming to our border. They need to wait. It takes time to rebuild the system from scratch. If they come, if families come, if single adults come to the border, we are obligated to, in the service of public health, including the health of the very people who are thinking of coming, to impose the travel restrictions under the CDC's Title 42 authorities and return them to Mexico. And we have done that. We need individuals to wait, and I will say that they will wait with a goal in mind, and that is our ability to rebuild as quickly as possible a system so that they don't have to take the dangerous journey, and we can enable them to access humanitarian relief from their countries of origin. The fact of the matter is that families and single adults are indeed being returned under the COVID-19 restrictions. Let me then turn to the issue and the challenge of unaccompanied children, because I know that much has been reported about the handling of unaccompanied children. And let me just explain the process, if I may. When an unaccompanied child reaches the border and comes in between the ports of entry, U.S. Customs and Border Protection personnel, specifically the United States Border Patrol, brings that child to a Border Patrol station for processing. The Border Patrol is only a pass-through. We are obligated to turn that child over to the Department of Health and Human Services within 72 hours. We are a pass-through. And then Health and Human Services, or HHS, of course, as is commonly referred to, addresses the needs of that child as HHS is identifying and vetting sponsors in whose trust the child can be placed while the child is in immigration proceedings. And so we have the child for a maximum of 72 hours. And of course, given the pandemic and its restrictions, given the extreme weather conditions in Texas, a critical part, that 72-hour time frame was certainly under stress, as we all know, and as we can all understand. And then children are in HHS custody for an average of about 31 or 32 days. Finally, let me turn to, I think, the most powerful and heartbreaking example of the cruelty that preceded this administration, and that is the intentional separation of children from their parents. I am the chairman. I have the privilege of serving at the President's designation as the chairman of the Family Reunification Task Force. The First Lady has driven us to action through her personal commitment to this moral imperative. And that moral imperative is to reunite the families and restore them to the fullest capacity that we as the United States government can do. And I should say that we are not doing it alone. We are working closely with counsel for the separated family members. We are doing it along with the countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. I spoke with the foreign minister of each of those countries this past Friday. We are doing it with non-governmental organizations, and we intend to and will shortly harness the capabilities, resources, and desire of the private sector. This is not only an all of government, but all of society effort to do what is right. We are hoping to reunite the families either here or in the country of origin. We hope to be in a position to give them the election. And if, in fact, they seek to reunite here in the United States, we will explore lawful pathways for them to remain in the United States and to address the family needs. So we are acting as restoratively as possible. I am very proud and excited to announce that we have hired Michelle Branet as the Executive Director of the Family Reunification Task Force. She began late last week. Most recently, she served as the Senior Director of the Migrant Rights and Justice Program of the Women's Refugee Commission. She has dedicated her entire career to human rights, and she is an extraordinary talent that will bring justice and results to this effort, along with the resources of the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services, and every other member of the federal government that has resources to bring to bear. It is because of the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security and across the federal enterprise that we will dig out of the cruelty of the past administration, and we will rebuild our nation's asylum system and all of our humanitarian programs, of which we have been historically so proud as a leader in the world. And with that, Jen, I'm pleased to take questions.
Great. Can I take it off?
Thank you, Secretary. You mentioned that it will take some time to rebuild the department. How long? I mean, obviously, you're asking the American people to be patient, these migrants to be patient. How long will it take to rebuild these systems and processes and staffing that you say you inherited that were not there when you inherited the agency? And then also on the Family Reunification Task Force, how big is this population of separated families right now, of separated children, and how many have you already been able to reunify, and what's the timeline for getting them all reunified?
In but a few weeks, we already have designed an innovative program to bring people in through the ports of entry, those that most acutely in need by reason of the fact that they have been remaining in Mexico for so long. And we have already begun to implement it. We are progressing every single day. I don't have a particular timeline, but all I can do is communicate both to the American public and to the individuals seeking protection that we are working around the clock 7 days a week to make that time frame as short as possible, but they need to wait. But they need to wait with a particular goal in mind. We are not saying don't come. We are saying don't come now, because we will be able to deliver a safe and orderly process to them as quickly as possible. There have been, I understand, approximately 105 families reunited in the recent past. That is through the extraordinary efforts of counsel and others in the community. We are joining with counsel, with members of the community to work on this, and Michelle will be full-time, and we are dedicating resources full-time across the government and the Department of Homeland Security specifically to this effort. The urgency of it cannot be overstated.
Secretary Mayorkas. A question about how unaccompanied migrant children are handled. The process that you articulated is the same as it was under former President Trump. It's the same as it was under former President Biden. The difference, as I understand it, with the Trump administration was that they held children for a longer period of time. How can that process be sped up? There are immigration advocates who say most kids who come here unaccompanied have the name or a phone number of a relative here in the U.S. and that they should be matched with them promptly.
So let me, if I may, correct one of the premises of your question. You said that we're handling them in the same way that the Trump administration did, and that is absolutely inaccurate.
The process that you articulated is
well,
roughly the same.
actually, the Trump administration expelled children to Mexico. And we are not expelling young children. We are not apprehending a 9-year-old child who's come alone, who's traversed Mexico, whose loving parents had sent that child alone. We're not expelling that 9-year-old child to Mexico when that child's country of origin was Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador. We are actually bringing that child into a Border Patrol station as a stepping point to get that child in the hands of HHS that has the capacity and the unique talents to care for the child, healthcare workers, mental health counseling, and the like, and moving that child to a sponsor as quickly as possible. So we have taken a look at the process that is in place, and we are re-engineering it to see, for example, whether we could have HHS personnel co-located in a Border Patrol station, start to identify the needs of the child, to see if that child does indeed have a relative in the United States, identify the sponsor more quickly, and unite that child with the sponsor more quickly. So a re-engineering we are taking a look at where efficiencies can be achieved in the best interest of the child. It is the best interest of the child that really define our actions.
And on the family reunifications, if I may, just quickly, looking at the principles that you laid out to guide the work of the Family Reunification Task Force, I didn't see in there accountability, making sure that it never happens again, but also holding the Trump administration's responsible for that policy, holding them accountable. The Justice Department Inspector General put out basically a roadmap that says that Jeff Sessions and DOJ leadership at the time was responsible for that, enforcing that zero tolerance policy.
So it's very important. First of all, those principles are our guide. We are going to be discussing what can we do under the law, because remember, we must address the needs of each family member in an individualized way, each family unit in an individualized way in accordance with the law. So these are our goals. Our overarching goal is, of course, to be as humane as the law provides, to be as restorative as the law enables us to be, to bring justice to these families. One of the tasks of the Reunification Task Force will be, of course, in addition to reuniting those families, which of course is the most acute urgency, to also take a look at the system and ensure, to your very important question, to ensure that it does not happen again. As the President has so powerfully said, this is not who we are.
Mr. Secretary, in South Texas, several city officials are requesting COVID tests from the state of Texas for migrants. What plan is DHS putting in place to do COVID testing for migrants?
So if I can level set on that, the extraordinary weather that Texas suffered and to which the President responded with such urgency created an unexpected stress on our system. As a matter of process, individuals, family units are brought into ICE custody. They are tested. ICE has the capability to test them, to isolate and quarantine them as the results so dictate, and then to address their needs as the immigration process provides.
So it is happening right now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And if I could also ask, you said please don't come. You sent the message, now is not the time. What specifically and how is this administration conveying that message to these desperate families and people who respectfully probably will not heed your warning to please don't come now? What are you doing to convey the message to them?
So multi-part answer, if I may. Number one, of course, with respect to our resources, we are flooding the space with that critical message. I cannot overstate its criticality for the well-being of those very individuals who are thinking of coming. Not to mention the well-being and stability of the border as we seek to rebuild it from its dismantled state. We are not communicating alone. We are communicating in partnership with non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations that do have the ear of these very communities, and we are doing it in tandem with the governments of Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. It's very difficult to know those whom we have successfully deterred, but our understanding is that it does work to a degree, certainly with certain aspects of the population, and it is a message that we need to continue to communicate. It is our obligation as a nation to do so.
Kristen? Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do you believe that right now there is a crisis at the border?
I think that the answer is no. I think there is a challenge at the border that we are managing, and we have our resources dedicated to managing it.
And so a lot of the things that you are talking about, you admit, take some time to implement. But right now you've got about 200 migrant children crossing the border every single day. CBP projected a peak of 13,000 unaccompanied children in the month of May, according to a report in Axios. What is being done between now and then when you're able to implement all the things that you're talking about that you say will take time?
Let me answer that question with tremendous pride. The men and women of the Department of Homeland Security are working around the clock 7 days a week to ensure that we do not have a crisis at the border, that we manage the challenge as acute as the challenge is, and they are not doing it alone. This is a challenge that the border communities, the non-governmental organizations, the people who care for individuals seeking humanitarian relief all understand it is an imperative. Everyone understands what occurred before us, what we need to do now, and we are getting it done.
Respectfully, sir, though, one of your predecessors, Jay Johnson, he said that 1,000 illegal border crossings a day constitutes a crisis, that it overwhelms the system. We're at between 3,000 and 4,000 now, according to CBP officials. So how is this not a crisis?
I have explained that quite clearly. We are challenged at the border. The men and women of the Department of Homeland Security are meeting that challenge. It is a stressful challenge, and that is why, quite frankly, we are working as hard as we are, not only in addressing the urgency of the challenge, but also in building the capacity to manage it and to meet our humanitarian aspirations and execution of the President's vision.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Does the administration support using budget reconciliation to legalize millions of undocumented immigrants this year, as Senator Warren and 100 other Democratic lawmakers have called for?
The President on day one sent a bill to Congress. The President recently spoke of that bill. That bill addresses what there is unanimity about, which is we are operating under a broken immigration system, and we need to fix it.
Specifically, would you consider using the budget reconciliation process?
It is not for me to decide the legislative strategy that the administration employs. The administration is committed to passing immigration legislation, and the administration is pursuing a path that everyone understands is direly needed.
Steve, we'll go with two more.
You said that the previous administration had entered into some contracts that were unlawful. Could you give some examples of that? What do you mean?
Let me give you an example that already has been in the public domain, quite frankly, and that is the agreement on January 19th, one day before the new administration was to commence, an agreement with the union of Immigration and Customs Enforcement that the union must approve any policy changes in the immigration arena. I've been in government for almost 20 years now. I've never seen a contract like that, and I certainly haven't seen a contract like that on the last day of an administration.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm with ABC News, and we reached out to HHS and Border Patrol after the suggestion from Jen last week to try and gain access to the tent facilities in Texas. We've been
I'm
told
sorry, I didn't quite hear, but let me, if I can,
Yes.
say one thing back to that question, if I may. Because there can be honest disagreements about policy, but there has to be an overriding credo, and that is loyalty to our institutions and what they stand for and the fundamental rule of law. And I find an agreement like that in dereliction of that duty. Yes.
I'll project this time. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I apologize.
I'm with ABC. We reached out to HHS and the Border Patrol about gaining access to the tent facilities in Texas. We were told we can't because of COVID restrictions. If there is a safe way to do this, to get reporters down there, to show the American people the conditions there where these unaccompanied children are being held, would you allow that?
I'm happy to take a look at that. I owe it to my people to understand the situation and the reasons why access was denied. I will share with you another principle to which I intend to adhere throughout my tenure, and that's openness and transparency. And that includes the Fourth Estate. I actually grew up as a journalism student, but apparently I wasn't a good enough writer to make it the whole way. Let me share with you what I communicate to the workforce, and we'll leave it at that, because it's in the service of openness and transparency. Don't shrink from criticism. Just work very hard not to deserve it. Thank you very much.
All right.
Oh, I'm happy to take another one.
One more.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What is the status of the review of the Trump-era visa bans for H-1B visas? And has the White House decided to lift those bans before they expire at the end of the month?
You know, I don't really. I hate to end the questioning on a question, the answer to which I am not certain. But look, this goes to what preceded us. We have so much work to do to repair and to restore and to rebuild that we have a prioritization matrix. And, of course, the acute needs of individuals fleeing persecution is a high priority, which brings me to this meeting this morning.
Thank you, everyone. Secretary, we'd love to have you back again. There's clearly lots of questions.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Jen.
joining us.
Thank you.